Dr. Rachel, welcome to the Visionary Life podcast. We are actually touching on something that in over 350 episodes, I have never covered this topic before, which is why I decided you need to come on the show because you are the expert in fertility. You have so much knowledge as a naturopathic doctor with this specialty. So we're going to dive into it all. I'm going to hold nothing back. I know you have a lot to share, so thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Rachel, there are so many motivated, high achieving, let's call them type A women. I am one. I think you might identify with a little bit of that too. And we want to do it all. Like, we want to have the business. We want to be the best parent. We want to be pursuing our athletic goals. And we have a gym membership that we show up to 5 days a week. We have friend circles. We want to go on cottage weekends. Like, we want to keep the house clean. I could go on. I am so curious, like with that phrase of women can do everything, we can do it all, how does that potentially not serve us as women who are trying to conceive, as women in our 30s potentially who want to extend our families but might be having trouble?
Mhm. So I think the important part there is being told we can do it all, which, is not wrong. We really can do anything that we put our minds to, but where that can sometimes get us into trouble is if we're waiting too long to think about growing our families. I find there are people who are told, well, science will figure it out, right? And unfortunately, in my role, working in a fertility practice now for it's been almost 6 years, sometimes science can't figure it out. So I really think it's important for young people to think about their fertility when they're thinking about their career choices as well, so that they don't wind up being out of options and being surprised about that.
Hmm. So, what exactly do we need to consider? Like, let me rewind to my mid 20s. I was working a corporate job. I was thinking about starting my own consulting business. What would you say were some of the things that I should have been thinking about in terms of making important career decisions in my most fertile decade, we'll call it?
Yeah. So mid 20s, I think, as long as things are going well with your cycles and you're not noticing any sort of major hormonal problems, that time of life may not be the most, how do I say, pressing time to figure things out. But certainly by the time you're getting closer to the 30 mark, if you haven't started to think about whether or not you would like to have children at some point in your life, regardless of whether or not you have a partner, it's good to get a baseline evaluation of where are things at, right? Um, Certain tests you can do include looking into your ovarian reserve, for example. That's something that we can easily evaluate through blood work, getting a sense even of baseline hormonal testing if that's something that you're curious to find out. So once we have that information, it can be really helpful to then give you options. So let's say you're a 30 something female entrepreneur and you don't have a partner, but one day you would like to be a parent. Well, perhaps you're thinking about, okay, is this a good time for me to consider doing egg cryopreservation or egg freezing so that by the time, I am 40, and perhaps if I haven't had children at that point, and perhaps I don't have a partner to have children with, that I can go ahead and move forward with my family building goals using much younger eggs, right? So these are big topics, but it's and we don't necessarily have to go to that extent, but it is helpful around that 30 mark to learn about your fertility so that you have choices.
Mm. Yeah, it's so funny because my friends and I often laugh that in our young 20s, we were like doing everything we could to not get pregnant, right? And then it's like as you transition into the next decade, into your 30s, you're like doing everything you can to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like it's not as easy as we thought. So I am curious to kind of set up this conversation. What are some of the reasons that women who are in their mid to late 20s, early 30s, why might they be having trouble
Mhm,
conceiving? What
mhm.
are some of those factors that you could bring awareness to just so that we know like what potentially is holding us back?
Yeah, it's interesting, being in this world now. I've been in practice for almost 11 years, and it has been 11 years. And, being specifically within the fertility world for the last almost six, you really see trends. And I am still surprised to this day. I don't know why I'm surprised anymore, but I
Mhm.
am when I see young people coming in who are in poor health. And that's the reason why they're having difficulty conceiving. We see a lot of polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, going
Mm.
on in the clinic. And unfortunately, at the root of that is often issues with blood sugar control. And that often stems back to poor lifestyle factors, right? So, individuals who don't know how to eat well, they haven't been taught that before, they don't understand the value of exercise. And so they're coming into the clinic with, you know, blood sugar that is steps away from diabetes, or they're already diabetic, or we have high cholesterol levels, or, we have really high inflammatory markers, and they're not getting regular periods. And, we see this all the time. And it's not always PCOS that presents. We do see a lot of thyroid issues that occur within the fertility world. So that definitely is a problem. And I'm certainly seeing more endometriosis as that condition becomes better worked up and diagnosed by other healthcare providers that are working with patients in the family practice setting. I'm seeing more of that come into the clinic too.
Mm. What about things like stress, sleep, never feeling like you can rest or give yourself a mental break, like things that women, I think, tend towards, especially when they're entrepreneurs, like working hard, long nights, almost like masculine energy, I'll call it, like gotta do all the things, wear all the hats. How do you see that impacting a
Mhm.
woman's fertility journey?
Yeah. And, I think when you're younger, that
Mhm.
maybe won't be as impactful, but as patients get older and we start to see their egg quality waning and we start to see hormonal shifts happening, certainly that high cortisol output on a regular basis can throw things off. And so we can see that impacting cycles. We can see that impacting um, thyroid function. I see that in some cases. So that's where we'll sometimes see that throwing things off. There is, thing that we'll commonly hear about is, oh, just relax and you'll get pregnant. And I think that's really misleading and upsetting for a lot of people because it's never as simple as that. The research is clear that stress certainly can impact fertility, but we're not clear that stress causes infertility, right? Like, so I don't want to, oversimplify it and say, if you're too stressed, this isn't going to happen, right? I mean, people get pregnant during wartime. So,
Mm.
it's really not fair to say that if you're stressed, then it's not going to happen. The world is stressful. We
Mhm.
live in stressful times. Oftentimes it comes down to, well, how are you managing that stress, right? And we do have to find ways to really prioritize our wellness. What are the non-negotiable things that you need to be doing just to be a healthy human? How on earth can we expect you to create another one if you aren't already yourself, right? I
Mm.
often kind of, I don't joke about this necessarily, but I'll say in practice that my patients are like the ultimate bodybuilders. And the reason this is, interesting is because I come from this history of bodybuilders in my family.
Yep.
One of them being my mother and my stepfather years ago when he was still alive. And so I spent a lot of time surrounded by bodybuilders. If
Yep.
anyone knows anything about bodybuilding, these people are, really eating a lot of protein
Yeah.
and sleeping a lot. And some of these things we can carry forward into the fertility world where it's like technically you're the ultimate bodybuilder. We're trying to create a whole other human, right? We
Yeah.
need to prioritize how you're caring for yourself. Do you need to eat protein in the middle of the night? Probably not. Do you need to work out for hours a day? Probably not. But can we borrow some of these habits? Exercise, eating well, good sleep. Yes, we can borrow some of those habits so that we can have you achieving your, fertility goals.
Mm. Is there anything that's changed? I know this is a big question, but is there anything that's changed environmentally over the last few decades that has caused fertility to go down? Because it's just crazy. Like when I was just in Vegas for a conference and I was talking to a few women who were doing IVF in their mid 30s, and I feel like everywhere I go, like I'm having a lot of these conversations, and I keep wondering to myself, is this more common now? Are we just talking about it more? What is your perspective on like what's going on with yeah, like the trends in infertility rates?
Yeah. I think it's a perfect storm, to be honest.
Mm,
As mentioned earlier, I really do think that there is a bit of a problem with overall wellness. And I really do see that every single day. I mean, it is a rare moment when I have, patients, labs hitting my desk and I'm
yeah.
not seeing metabolic issues, nutrient deficiencies, hormonal imbalances. Like that's just my everyday experience and practice. And then add to that a lot of the toxins that are out there in the world, and certainly things that I screen my patients for when they are in for an initial consultation are things like, what's your plastic usage like?
Ah,
What are your personal care and cleaning products like? Are you using a lot of scented products in your
mm,
home? What's your air quality like? What's your water quality like? Right? Where do you live? Right? Are you by a highway? In my area where we're located here, I'll tell you, I mean, I'm associated with a number of different clinics throughout the province, and it's quite well known that in this particular clinic where we're located in the Hamilton area, we have, not great sperm quality for a lot of patients. And when you think about, well, what's around? We have refineries, we have a lot of farms and a lot of
yep.
wineries where a lot of pesticides are being used.
Oh,
So, these are things that we have to consider, that toxic burden is a lot higher for people. And
yeah.
some people don't handle those toxins as well as others. And we'll see that play out with their egg quality and with their sperm quality and with their hormone balance levels. Another thing that I think is problematic is just some of the social toxins that have become, really common,
Yep.
especially marijuana now that it's legal here in Canada. We have a lot of patients who are using that and have no awareness that it's very problematic for sperm quality.
Mm.
Other things that I'm seeing lately is, people are quitting smoking and that's great, but then they're switching over to nicotine pouches or they're vaping instead. And okay, well, these things aren't helping either, right? So sometimes I'll joke that I'm Dr. Killjoy because when patients come to see me, I'm taking away all of their fun.
Yep.
You can have sex, but you can't do anything else. Right?
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot out there these days that is impacting our overall, fertility levels, and we are seeing the impacts of that in a variety of ways.
Hmm. I think it's probably easy when you're having conversations like this to like feel a little bit doomsday or, to all of a sudden feel like, oh my gosh, like everything I'm doing is potentially harming my potential. I'm curious if you are giving kind of generic advice to the person who's listening, who's like, I just need to know, like, what are some of the things I should start doing
Yeah,
and what are some of the things I should stop doing?
yeah,
Let's give a few tactical tips to the person who's like,
sure,
okay, all of this is, happening in my life. What can I do about it?
sure. So, a couple of resources that could be helpful. I do on my website have a fertility challenge per se that patients, or not patients, excuse me, but readers can go through, and
Yep.
it's completely free. And what it does is it walks people through this idea of kind of 6 pillars of fertility wellness. And so it helps, patients, gosh, I keep saying patients. That's because I've been in clinic all day since 7 in the morning. People, it helps people work through, just some evaluation of their nutrition, some general insights on their toxic load,
Yep.
gives them some information on, what could be going on from a hormonal perspective. It talks about the benefits of sleep and stress management, conception timing, things like that. And then I also have a course that I've created. It's a masterclass, essentially teaching people all about their cycles. So, this is someone who's listening who's a menstruating person, and they remember learning about their menstrual cycles back in, elementary school or in high school, and then they like forgot or wanted nothing to do about it. And now they're thinking about getting pregnant and they're like, what the heck? That's a good opportunity to really learn about, well, when do I try?
Yep.
What are the apps that are out there? How can I use those to really learn about my body? What about the
Mhm.
technology and the tools that are out there? I've heard about ovulation predictor kits. When do I use those? What do those tell me? Right? There's a lot of information out there on the internet, but sometimes it can be hard to know how that applies to you. So I've
Mhm.
tried to make that more available from, maybe a slightly more educated person, so that people can learn that about themselves. So I really do think those are some of the good places to start to chip away. Is to look at those basics.
Amazing. You mentioned something about, the different phases of our menstrual cycle as women.
Mhm.
And as female entrepreneurs, I feel like there's so much still to be studied and even just to like learn in how we can actually structure our business and
Mhm.
like what rituals we have each week or when we do speaking gigs or when like there are times when I'm like, I just don't want to get on any client calls
Yeah.
because I'm on my period or it's
Yeah.
leading up to. Can you just walk us through a little bit of what that typical 28-day cycle
Sure.
is like and
Mhm.
how can that actually guide our business decisions
Yeah.
as women running business who are potentially trying to conceive, but also want to maximize our energetic outputs during
Right.
every single stage of our
Mhm.
cycle?
Yes. And so I'll speak to this. I want to remind people that you can get overwhelmed with the information that's out there on this topic.
Yeah,
There's so much about, only exercise like this and only eat like this at this time in the cycle and use
yeah,
these seeds. And I think that really can create overwhelm when at
yeah,
the end of the day, we're really just trying to encourage people to have healthy habits. So if it
yeah.
becomes overwhelming to only eat sunflower seeds for these 2 weeks of your cycle, well, don't
Yeah.
do it, right? Like just eat the sunflower seeds whenever you want.
Or like I have someone I follow on Instagram who's like, only do a hard leg day on this day of your cycle, and then you can have an extra half piece of sourdough on this stage. And I'm like, what? Like
That's
this is
beyond.
so minuscule. I'm
Yeah,
gonna eat sourdough every day.
absolutely. Yeah, like that kind of stuff I think gets very problematic and again can overcomplicate things, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be that complicated. Are there different phases of the menstrual cycle? Yes. Are you going to feel differently throughout those phases? Sure. Do we need to radically change our lives? Probably not, to meet those different phases, but you can listen to your body. And so you'll hear things about, during menses, that it's a nice time to rest. Well, during menses, you probably want to rest anyway, right? Like a lot of people aren't feeling super fantastic. Not that we want you to feel terrible.
Yeah.
That's a sign of other problems, but you probably do want to rest for those few days.
Yep.
But we also know that exercise can help with period cramps, right?
Yep.
So
Mhm.
going out and getting moving isn't going to hurt you. We
Yeah.
hear about closer to ovulation, which is generally the middle of the cycle. People who are more engaging at that time, or they may have more confidence. They might be better, well, received by others. And that's because their hormone levels are often peaking, in particular their estrogen and even a little bit of like their testosterone levels. So some people might feel more confident putting themselves out there during that type of time of the cycle. Then we talk about the luteal phase where, that's after ovulation. And, potentially if you're trying to conceive, you could be in the very early stages of pregnancy. If you haven't conceived, then you're going to be in this time when your progesterone levels tend to be a bit higher. So sometimes people can feel a little bit more drawn inward. Maybe they feel a little bit quieter. Maybe they don't want to put themselves out there as much. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But I don't think it always works out perfectly that we can match all of our, business needs and life needs to things that are going on with our cycle.
Mhm.
So honestly, I think it's better just to listen to your body and kind of do what's right for you.
Mhm.
So as not to overcomplicate.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's like all this information can be so empowering, but it's like, what is the tipping point when it becomes overwhelming and it actually starts to become a burden mentally and in many other ways too? So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a valid point.
I always
Now,
come back to, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I always come back to two um, sort of thoughts from, really well-known people. Katie Couric is one of them, so a well-known US journalist. She had this great quote that I've held on to for years and years, which is, essentially, there's often a situation of too much information or TMI and not enough understanding. So
Mm,
NEU. So I always think like TMI, NEU. And that's a really good way to just, take the internet,
yeah,
take chat GPT, right? Like you could get all the things in the world, but do you have enough understanding? Do you have the knowledge, skills, and judgment to be able to interpret this and apply this to yourself?
yep.
Maybe not, in which case you might need an expert.
Hmm.
And then I always come back to Marie Forleo's NNT, so non negotiable time, where she really encourages people to come up with their list of non negotiable things. What are those things that keep you going every single day? I know for me, it's exercise. That's like non negotiable, right?
Hmm.
Drinking my water, having time to, prepare healthy food. These are non negotiable items in my life. What are those non negotiable things for you? Let's stick with those. And then we don't have to worry about when to eat sourdough.
I love that so much. It's like, yes, having these like guardrails, but it's not like so strict that you can't veer outside of them and like enjoy life a little bit and stray from your habits, but come right back to course when you need to. So, yeah, that's so helpful.
Yeah,
Now,
perfection is not going to get you pregnant. So,
And I think we need that reminder, right? As women who potentially are striving for the perfect launch or to have this beautiful branding online. Like, I know that so many of the listeners, like, there is this standard that they hold themselves to. And so when we then relate that to fertility and trying to conceive, it's like, oh, it doesn't work that way. Like you can't try harder. Of course, you can optimize, but you don't get to like execute everything perfectly to get the result. It's just a different, yeah, like a different game.
totally is.
Hmm. So let's talk to the woman who is potentially in a season where she wants to conceive, but she's also got a lot on her plate with her business.
Mhm.
To that woman, do you say like it's time to unload a little bit? You need to maybe hire help, maybe don't schedule that launch? Like, if someone is so regimented, they have a schedule that's packed 9 to 5 every day. There's a lot of targets that they need to reach. They have, these big quarterly goals that they're reaching towards, but they also have this other goal of expanding their family. What do you say to that person?
Breathe. No, that oversimplifies it. Um, I don't think it would be fair for me to say that you can't work through those things
Yep.
while you're trying to conceive, right? I think it really has a lot to do with the person's, fertility status. If
Yep.
I need someone to scale it back, I'm probably going to know more about that if I'm seeing issues within their, fertility baseline testing, or if they're going through fertility treatments and we're seeing issues,
Mm,
right?
yep.
Like, does
Yep.
their 9 to 5 being like, does that packed schedule mean that they're stressed to the max and they're
Yep.
relying on 5 cups of coffee in a day?
Yep.
If that's the case, then okay, maybe we need to talk about how this is impacting you. Does it mean you're not getting any sleep? Does it mean you're not getting any exercise? Does it mean you can't eat healthy food?
Yep.
Well, if that's the case, then we probably need to scale back.
Hmm.
But for other people, if that's their norm, that's how they operate,
Yep.
and they're still able to care for themselves and they're not seeing cycle impacts, then it might not be a problem for them to continue on with living their life that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if we start to see it become a problem, then that's, a different story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying because it's such a reminder that, like, as with anything in life, there is nuance, right? It's like when somebody buys a digital course and they're trying to learn how to make Instagram reels and they follow it exactly. And they're like, wait, but that didn't work for me the same way that it worked for the person who sold it. It's like, well, life is nuanced. Like, there is no one size fits all formula. And that's why it's so nice to have one-on-one support in times like these, like whether you're trying to grow your business, whether you're trying to extend your family, whether you're trying to train for a half marathon. Sometimes the blanket advice, the chat GPT, the constant emails that we get with stuff, it's like that's all well and good, but then also working with a trusted professional can kind of bridge that gap into like actually taking the knowledge and being like, what is for me and what is not for me, right?
Yeah. I do find as, if I put my business hat on for a minute and I think about the work that I do in the fertility clinic, it is that one-on-one, like door closed, no one else is involved in this but me and the patient. Like that relationship is so important.
Yeah.
These patients are not sitting in the waiting room chatting to each other,
Ah,
right? Like it's not even going to some fertility, community events that are out there. That's not always a comfortable experience for a lot of people. So
yeah.
you'll see a lot of fertility patients connecting online because they can be a little bit more anonymous, right?
Yep. Hmm.
And so, even professionally, when I've tried to do things online, I don't always find that they're as well received.
Yeah.
But my clinical practice is very busy, and
Hmm.
I think it's
Hmm.
because people really enjoy that. Like, okay, I finally get to talk about the nitty gritty details of how this is impacting me,
Yeah.
and what are the nuances of my particular situation.
Hmm.
It is very personalized.
Hmm. Now, you mentioned having a busy practice, being fully booked. We have a lot of people who are a little more junior in similar shoes as you. Maybe they've just graduated from their designation, they're becoming a health professional, they are entering into a career path where they're kind of responsible for building their own clientele. So, to shift gears a little bit, I'm just curious if you can share, like, what do you feel was that inflection point of you going from like, hey, I'm just starting my practice, trying to build, to now having a fully booked practice? That is a goal of so many of our listeners to get to that point. And then, of course, to like keep on growing from there. But can you share any of like the success moments, the moments
Yeah.
that your career popped, and like how did you turn this into a business where now you have a solid niche? You're helping a full roster of patients. Anything you want to say on that?
Time,
Time, yeah.
flexibility, and tenacity,
Yeah.
and having a really good team, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is not something you can really do on your own. I have
Yeah.
lots of people behind me. I
Yeah.
have to. So, my career has never been a straight line at all, right? And, I've worked with you to help with my professional development. And that, it's been very up and down. And when I graduated in 2013, um, where I started then in practice is certainly not where I've wound up. And yet, everything that happened along that journey, good and bad, it involved kind of a lot of stop and start,
Yeah.
especially as I was growing my family and going through some of my own issues with conceiving and maintaining healthy pregnancies primarily.
Yeah.
That it's just not a straight line journey. So you have to be willing to let it grow. You have to be willing to accept that there will be change. You have to know that things will go up and down. I always heard from, people who had graduated before me that it could sometimes take 10 years to really hit your stride. And
Wow.
you know what? Sometimes it really does. Does
Yeah.
that mean you give up? No, I think I am a bit of a tenacious person.
Hmm.
So I don't I don't give up too easily. And so, I've just always kind of stuck with that knowledge of keep going, even if things aren't perfect, even if you think you're not meant to do this one day and you want to give up, and even if miscarried again, you're thinking, how am I going to keep going? And
Yep.
any variety of things. Like, gosh, it's been wild, certainly in my practice life. But there is definitely a sweet spot. I do find that although I was a little bit resistant to it initially, finding a niche in practice is helpful. It
Yes.
does help because you can really be really targeted with your messaging.
Yep. Hmm.
So that's an important point as well. And I do find that since I've joined my clinic here,
Yep.
it's been really a life-changing experience professionally.
Mm.
So yeah, I would
I
say.
love that you share the 10-year thing because I feel like that should just be the baseline of like just expect to be building and
Yeah.
pivoting and be non-linear for 10 years. And if it's sooner, great, but it might actually take that long because I feel like the narrative is like start your practice and like give it a year, give it 90 days. And it's like, wait,
No.
is that true? Because there's so much that, needs to unfold on every single journey. And I think that as we extend the time horizon, things always grow,
Mhm.
right? But it's that patience, that tenacity, like you're talking about, that eventually leads us to that fully booked roster. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
incredible to hear your story.
And creating those, I think what you helped me with so much was creating the systems.
Yeah.
When we started working together a couple of years ago, it was when I was fairly new in this practice. And, I really needed to create the systems and the consistency.
Yep.
So even if it's not perfect, having some degree of consistency really does make a difference. And I have some good systems in place in terms of, when I see a patient for a
Yeah.
consultation, at the end of that consultation, I'm ensuring that we are scheduling our next visit. Because
Yeah.
I know that if I'm the person who's going to see a healthcare provider and we don't talk about when I'm coming back, I probably won't
Yeah.
because I'm too busy. I'll forget.
Hmm.
Right. Or, when I think about, I keep a lot of lists so that I can kind of keep track of, well, how's that patient doing? And is that patient pregnant now? And have they had their follow up for this? And, are they on the right newsletter list? And
Yep.
I just try to be really organized. And it helps me also understand at the end of the year, well, how did things go in practice? Am I
Yeah.
growing? Have my patients had success? Where do I need to change?
Mhm.
So, these things take time to build up and it takes time to get into these habits.
Mhm.
And I'm certainly still constantly learning, especially with AI on our plates.
Oh my goodness. No
Yeah.
kidding. Yeah, as we wrap up, I'm curious, is there one area, whether it's personally or professionally, where you're currently leveling up or learning a new skill or devoting time and energy to? What's kind of your focus these days?
Mhm.
What's something you're super curious about?
Yeah. So, I mean, AI for sure is super
Yep.
interesting, and it's kind of fascinating being a healthcare provider with AI because I think there's a lot of fear out there generally with AI that it's gonna
Yeah.
take over, and
Yep.
it's so interesting because that's not how I see it at all.
I don't either.
Yeah, and I really just I see it as a tool to help with efficiency.
Yep.
Um,
Same.
and as a way to maybe take a little bit of the pressure off of entrepreneurs because there are things it can be really helpful with, but it really does not take away that personal touch and that human experience, right?
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
pretty fascinating. I'm definitely thinking about my next steps now that I do have, a fairly busy practice and there's only so many hours in the day.
Yep.
My children are getting older, and I find as they get older, they need me more.
Yep.
Interestingly enough,
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's it. I thought you were going to say the opposite.
no, I find they need well. Having a daughter in competitive dance and a son
Okay.
who no doubt will be in some sort of high level of hockey. Um,
Yep.
I'm going to have some demands on my time. I already do with dance competitions. So, how can I continue to, I don't know if grow my practice is the right way, probably grow my business structure so that I don't have to be one on one as much.
Yep.
can be, welcoming others into my practice in different roles, so that I can still be, home with my family too.
Amazing. So cool. And definitely keep us posted on that journey. We'll have to have you back in a year or two to see what evolution has happened, because I know that's such a common, common dream of like, how do I scale beyond myself? So really, really cool to hear a little piece of what you're working on. So
Thank you.
Dr. Rachel, if people want to connect with you, if they want to work with you, if they want to get your free resources, where are the best places for them to find you and to say hello?
So Instagram is where I do hang out the most.
Yep.
I will one day embark on TikTok, but I'm just still a little afraid. So Dr. underscore Rachel underscore ND is where I hang out on Instagram. My newsletter and a lot of information is available on my website at rachelcorradetti.com. Those are probably the best ways to find me.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll link everything in the show notes. And I just cannot speak highly enough of you, the entrepreneur you are, the naturopathic doctor that you are. So I would definitely recommend anyone listening who is curious to go check out your work and to connect with you and say hello. And yeah, we wish you all of the best. Thanks for diving into all things fertility, menstrual cycles, things that we don't always talk about on the Visionary Life podcast, but especially important for all of our female listeners. So
Yeah.
thank you, Dr. Rachel.
Thank you so much.